Good morning and welcome to the Morning Scoop for Wednesday, August 19th. This is your daily Buckeye fix. I'm Tom Orr. Ohio State added yet another top 100 player to its 2022 recruiting class yesterday as Dasan McCullough became the fifth commitment to the Buckeyes. Buckeye Scoop recruiting analyst Alex Gleitman is my guest this morning. He got to know Dasan pretty well throughout the recruiting process. He dropped a commitment episode of his Around the Oval podcast with Dasan when the commitment was official yesterday. Alex, let our listeners know, what is Ohio State getting in Dasan McCullough?
First off, they're getting a tremendous kid, not just a tremendous player. I mean, this kid is the real deal. Everything you see on the Around the Oval video, read in the interviews. I mean, that's Dasan McCullough. He is the son of Kansas City Chiefs running back Dasan McCullough, who also coached at Indiana under Kevin Wilson. He coached at USC. He played for the Cincinnati Bengals and played for Miami of Ohio. This is a kid who is just strictly business. He wakes up, he works out, he plays football, he works out again, he goes to sleep, he studies film, maybe in between there. From an aspect of off the field, this is a kid who's not going to give Ohio State staff any sort of trouble whatsoever off the field. He's going to be an excellent student of the game. He's going to be, first one in the the weight room, last one out type of kid. So that's first and foremost, right? Second, I would say, when you talk about on the field, and Dasan put this great, in the video interview he did with us, is that he is going to be a 6'5", 240-pound kid who can run a 4.5 40-yard dash. He's played safety in high school prior to this year. He's going to be kind of, I think, shifting down to a little bit more linebacker, and that's where he'll play at Ohio State. But they haven't, at least it's been a while, not in his recent memory, but Ohio State really hasn't had a player like him, like an Isaiah Simmons or maybe even a Cam Chancellor type of player, someone who they can move around the defense like a Swiss Army knife. He could rush the passer. He could drop back in coverage. He could play the run. And so I think it's just tremendous versatility that he's bringing to Ohio State on the field, in addition to, the great work ethic, high character, and high football IQ off the field.
Well, he is the third player listed as an outside linebacker to commit to the Buckeyes for 2022. The newly released Rivals rankings have all three of them in the top 25 overall in the class, nationally, regardless of position for that class. That's pretty darn good. So what is it that is making this such a great class for Al Washington in that linebacker unit?
Yeah, I just think that they went out and got some really, really good football players. You talk about C.J. Hicks. He's very similar to Dasan McCullough in the fact that he's very versatile. Former defensive back, now playing more linebacker. So he has the ability to run and cover. Maybe a little similar to Darren Lee coming out of high school. But I would say he's better than Darren at the same stage in their careers. So that's pretty scary to think about how good Darren Lee was. And then you got Gabe Powers, who I would probably compare, I think Bank nailed it, to a Bobby Carpenter type. More of that, like, maybe linebacker, defensive end hybrid, maybe the perfect 3-4 outside linebacker. Could he grow into a defensive end? I could certainly see it. Could he stay at linebacker? I could see that as well. I just think he's that Bobby Carpenter, Nathan Williams, Thaddeus Gibson, more defensive end linebacker hybrid type of player versus the other guys. And so I think between the three of them, it's really incredible the work Al Washington's done building relationships. He's clearly got his legs under him as a recruiter at Ohio State. And I think what him and Kerry Combs are going to be able to do for the defense and being able to show multiple looks and use these guys in creative ways, it's going to really bring a different element to what Ohio State's been doing on defense and what they will be doing before these guys arrive.
The obvious question now is, if you've got three guys who are listed as outside linebackers in a class and you've only got two spots on the field, at the outside linebacker spot, where do they all fit? You talked about his versatility, McCullough's versatility, and Powers potentially being able to play with his hand in the dirt if he wanted to. That flexibility, though, is something that I think it feels like that's something they're really actively looking for, that they're recruiting the guys who were safeties in high school, but project to be able to maybe keep that speed, but also put on a little more muscle, get a little bigger as they get to Ohio State. Is that just is there going to be a little bit of get these guys on campus and then we'll figure it out? If we have fast, athletic, strong, big linebackers / defensive ends, having too many of those is not a problem. We'll just figure it out when they get here.
Yeah, I think that's a great problem to have. I think you look at Alabama during their run in their dynasty, and they've had this problem quite often, whether it be linebacker, defensive end, or defensive back. and you just figure it out. You figure out what are these guys' best skill sets? How do we best use them? Is it down and distance? Is it, against certain teams? I mean, Ohio State did a little bit of this last year, against the Wisconsins of the world, and even against Michigan. They used Justin Hilliard in a 4-4 look a little bit more to get that extra linebacker on the field and play, against teams that are going to be a little bit heavier, run heavy. And so I think you could see a lot more of that, not only on a week-to-week basis, but within the game, using different packages, using different personnel, to be able to play to the skill sets and the strengths of the guys that you have on your defensive depth chart, depending on not only who the opponent is, but what the down and distance situation is.
For a lot of the summer, we've been talking about Dasan McCullough as someone who probably needed to visit before everyone was totally comfortable with him committing. That has obviously now changed now that he's committed. But with the recruiting calendar basically hanging in purgatory for the foreseeable future, is that something that you think could happen with more guys? Is that something we could see more frequently now coming in the next few months?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think, my initial reaction was the 2022 cycle was actually going to be pushed back. And it was going to be a little bit of a slower cycle. And I think it will be for like the majority of kids who maybe need to be seen in a camp setting, maybe need to be seen play this upcoming season if that happens, and just be seen and noticed and evaluated by the staffs. Now, the guys like Dasan McCullough, who are some of the highest ranked guys in the country that have, he had 45 offers. I think guys like that, a lot of the guys Ohio State has targeted offers are going to make decisions earlier because they want to lock in a spot just in case. They really don't know what is going to happen moving forward with visits and just college football in general, especially in the recruiting world. And so I think if you have the opportunity to commit to a school like in Ohio State right now, you lock that in. I think a lot of these guys, the 5 they have, I think are rock solid. I don't think they're looking anywhere else, but I do think there are guys around the country that are going to lock a spot into a class and then see what happens later. So I expect the trend to be at least a lot of these top guys to start committing a little bit earlier than I originally thought they would.
Well, okay, so who are some other guys who you think could potentially join the Ohio State class in, say, just the next few months?
Yeah, well, on September 1st coming up, Bennett Christian, tight end from Georgia, will be deciding between Ohio State and Tennessee. He had an excellent visit to Ohio State last weekend, and he wasn't allowed to have in-person contact with the staff, but he got to check out Columbus for the first time, drive around campus. He was on the phone with Kevin Wilson telling him where to go, what to look at. He saw the city of Columbus, and I think that really put Ohio State in a strong position to potentially land him. He's a Tennessee legacy, so he'll be visiting Knoxville this weekend for one last look at what the campus and the college town and the Vols program, obviously not being able to meet with the staff, same thing as Ohio State, has to offer him. But, I think Ohio State going into that trip has the lead. So that's certainly one person that I have my eye on. I think, there's potential running back situations. Damari Alston down in Georgia, Nick Singleton from Pennsylvania. You got Katron Allen from IMG Academy, Dylan Tatum from the state of Michigan. I think those are guys. I'm not saying they're going to make a decision now, but I know that those are guys that they're really high on. And if they start to push and start to press, potentially something could happen. I think Luther Burden, wide receiver out of St. Louis, same high school as Jamison Williams. I think Ohio State is the leader right now. And I don't think he wants to make a decision anytime soon, but I could see, potentially if there was a domino to fall there. I'll say an offensive tackle, I think, or offensive guard. I'm not sure which he is. A guy like Blake Miller, an in-state guy. He wanted to wait, take some visits, maybe with everything going on, that potentially changes for him. And then Keonta Goodwin, an offensive lineman who weighed 400 pounds and is now down to about 300 at 6'7" from the state of Indiana. Ohio State recently offered him. And I think that they're going to be a major player for his services. I'm just trying to think off the top of my head, go down my list here. I think that's a pretty good group right now. I think, obviously at linebacker, a guy like Sean Murphy or some other guys that they have that might be able to commit now with only maybe one linebacker spot left in this class. I think that's something to look at. I think Caden Curry, who's a defensive lineman from the state of Indiana, also is someone who's pretty high on Ohio State. And so, I think right now that's probably a good group to start with, but there's certainly a number of other top targets that you could hear making their decisions sooner versus later.
Well, there is obviously a lot more going on in the college football world right now than just recruiting. Today is the day that the Football Parents Association of Ohio State listed as the day when they wanted to have some more answers from the Big Ten in that letter that they sent to the conference. So that is going to be something we're going to be keeping a close eye on all day today at BuckeyeScoop.com. Yesterday, Ohio Governor Mike DeWine announced that high schools across the state would be allowed to play both contact and non-contact sports for the fall. That means we could be just a little more than a week away from the first high school football Friday of the year. That would not be too bad. Alex, how big is it for Ohio State's coaching staff, for the players, just to be able to potentially have, be able to potentially go scout some guys in person if they can, if that's allowed under the rules, but also just get another year of film where you have film that's not 10 and a half months old. How big a deal is that going to be for those coaching staffs and those players who didn't get to have a lot of that in-person contact at camp over the summer, like you mentioned earlier?
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be huge. Think about how many guys over the years earned their offers at Ohio State's camp. I mean, I know two really good Buckeyes in Darren Lee and Terry McLaurin come to mind for me, having seen their performances live and just seeing how that one opportunity at summer camp changed their whole trajectory of their lives, not only, where they're going to attend college. And so I think this is a huge opportunity for these kids to get some film out there. I'm hopeful that, there's some sort of rule from the NCAA that they allow coaches to go out and see kids in person. I understand maybe not having visits on campus, but maybe if there is some way for coaches to be able to go out and evaluate any high school football that is happening, I think that would be great. I'm not counting on it, though. So, the coaches, though, they're not just watching the huddle highlights. They're getting the full game film from these kids, seeing every single play, how they carry themselves, in between plays or after a disappointing play. So I think it will be a great opportunity. And I would say after about 4 weeks of game film is when you would start to see some evaluations being like rubber stamped and we can go on this kid. We're sold after about 4 weeks of game film. And so hopefully we get that far to 4 weeks, but at the same time, that's probably the magic number. So I'd say about 4 weeks from now is when you should start paying attention to potentially some new offers coming in.
All right, Alex, thank you so much for joining us this morning. You can find Alex's full commitment interview with Dasan McCullough. Just search for Around the Oval on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, SoundCloud. That is a fantastic, fantastic podcast series. He just talks to Ohio State recruits, Ohio State commits, just good deep dive conversations with them, really get to know some of the guys who are going to be playing for Ohio State in the next few years. So find that on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, SoundCloud. Tony Gerderman and I just dropped a new episode of Buckeye Weekly yesterday, talking all about the Big Ten situation and how they're handling all of it. Spoiler alert, not great. But we'll have, you can find that as well on all of your favorite podcast platforms of choice. We will have full coverage of whatever the Big Ten decides to respond with today to the Football Parents Association. That'll be at BuckeyeScoop.com. And hey, something else to keep an eye on later this week. Ohio State football parents, Iowa football parents, potentially others, planning to go to the Big Ten office in person to try and force a meeting with Big Ten staff, whether it's Commissioner Kevin Warren or someone else. It doesn't seem like this story is going to go away. So this would be a really good week to check out BuckeyeScoop.com. We have free content. We've got great content on our Ask the Insiders board, including insights from Alex and Bill Green and Mark Givler and Nevada Buck and all of our great staff. So check that all out at BuckeyeScoop.com. Thank you guys for listening. We'll talk to you tomorrow.